co-founder of Missouri Coalition Against Common Core. So for 4 years, I went to Jeff City to educate legislators, education leadership, and I've traveled throughout the state, particularly in the 7th District, to educate the citizenry about what Common Core really is. That is not my only interest. One of my, I guess you could say, more hidden interests is in entrepreneurship. I am from families of entrepreneurs. Both sets of grandparents owned restaurants. So I spent my childhood in those restaurants. They lived over those restaurants. I know what it is to be, the owner and provider for your family through a business that you have the freedom to control if the government isn't stepping on your neck. And that's more and more of what's going on. There are many parallels between what's going on in business, what's going on in education, and in other areas such as our religious freedom. What's going on is the government is telling us how to live and doing it through centralization. Common Core is really about data collection. The reason you need a common set of standards is to populate the spreadsheet in a data collection system. So anything they tell you about high quality standards is basically bunk, all right? You can negotiate the quality of those standards as far as they're concerned, as long as all of the states agree to the change. So there goes your state sovereignty, all right? So this is undermining our US Constitution, our state constitution, local control, and it's all for data collection, not just through a taxpayer-funded statewide longitudinal data system, but private corporations such as Pearson, McGraw-Hill, the other testing companies are collecting this data through your children's keyboard, and they're not asking your permission. And they're warehousing it so that it's accessible to them, but you don't know who has access to it. All right, do you see it? Why I fight so hard? Just yesterday, I believe in education. I believe in it for an educated citizenry. And you'll see on that handout that it's actually a matter of national security, a matter of national defense, for you to know the history of your country, your identity as an American, so that you will love it and want to defend it. All right? Jefferson knew that, and he said, we place education in public care. And there were 2 reasons for that. To ensure that everyone who was raised up through the system would know what it meant to be an American, but also to raise up leadership regardless of your socioeconomic status. So Lincoln, for example, was poor, almost self-educated, right? Do you remember the stories of him riding on a shovel with coal? He became one of the greatest presidents in our history, and it is because taxpayers in his community provided some of that education, right? Of course, he had a lot of initiative on his own, and that's what we have to engender, not a data system to tell the government what a student is doing and not doing. All right? If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
So, education and entrepreneurship are really what got you interested in running for Congress?
Oh, thanks for the question.
There are more to that.
Okay, I drafted the legislation to push the reset button so that we would go through the process of writing Missouri's own standards, all right? If you'll bear with me, what happened was the governor accepted grant money, statewide state fiscal stabilization funds, which was really part of the 2009 American Recovery Reinvestment Act. We were told through the media this was all about bailing out corporations. You weren't told about those billions of dollars set aside to hijack your education system, all right? That money went directly to the governors if they signed an MOU that said they will adopt for their states a common set of standards. Now clearly every governor violated their state statutes that said, here's the process for creating academic standards in our state. What I did was draft the legislation that say, no, you have to go back and go through the process as was in statute, and we're going to beef up the statute a little bit, all right? And Caroline was part of that hearing process. That's how I met her. Leslie Hubert, who is here with me today, is a teacher of history. She served with me on the 612 social studies standards. Now the point is, I did everything in my power to deal with this at the state level. In November, I drove to Washington, D.C. to ask Congressman Long to vote no on federal legislation called the Every Student Succeeds Act. Common Core is not mentioned verbatim in that act, but it says college and career standards. Okay, it's a synonym. There are other things in that law, such as giving the U.S. Secretary of Ed the power to reject your state accountability plans. Excuse me? Did any lawyer read the 10th Amendment before they put that in the bill? All right. I asked for a no vote. 2 days later, he voted yes. That was my inspiration to run. All right. So I'm maxed out on the state. Now I have to go to Washington and basically work with those congressmen who will honor the Constitution and get our state sovereignty back, local control back, power to the parents back. Because what's going on is statism. All right, the people who are implementing this system believe that the state is a better parent than you are. Anything else? Yes?
Mary, could you elaborate a little on what the groups come up with and present it to the Board of Education and what the Board of Education actually accepted?
What they actually did, okay, so we had 1 year to develop a set of standards. It actually probably, takes longer to develop standards, but somehow during conference, what happens is the House gets the bill, the Senate receives the bill, does its massaging, sends it back to General Assembly, they vote on it, then it goes to the governor. Somewhere in the conference meeting that negotiates what the Senate and the House will accept, dates were put in there that I did not originally have, that limited the process for developing these standards to 1 year. That said, what happened was every group in a subject area had the draft, but we didn't have time to align K-5 to 612. The board actually asked us, will you do that? My thought was, we can go back to the legislature, ask for an extension on the date. Instead, DESE took over and did its own editing of the standards. And when I went to the state board meetings to listen to what they did, they said, this is what's common in other states. Bingo, all right? So, and when I look at them, and Carolyn and I were talking about this, particularly when I look at the K-5, particularly when I look at kindergarten, they're developmentally inappropriate. If you've got a standard that says, the child with assistance will, how are you going to develop an assessment that's only going to evaluate the child's performance? You made a standard that said with assistance, so who's getting the score? All right? This is so bogus, and to me, you can't make a valid test that meets that standard. All right? So the state board adopted them, to answer your question, Lawrence. The state board adopted those. I call it Common Core Light. All right, and I met with the Commissioner of Education yesterday. Are you familiar with Senator Ed Emery? Have you met him?
Yes.
He organized a meeting between 4 Missouri Coalition Against Common Core members and 3 members of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. And so we had a 1-hour airing of grievances, mostly from us. And I felt it was very beneficial so that he could hear us be honest. We told him and we told them the very same things, as so we weren't making it up. But in 1 hour, you're not going to undo what took 4 years of opposition to create. I consider it a first meeting, and I wrote him an email this morning, copied it to Commissioner Van Diemen, and thanked him for his hospitality and his leadership in organizing that meeting. But then I said our next strategy will to go after the statewide longitudinal data system, because big data is not the answer to education.
Right.
All right. And I gave him the links to articles just to, that's me, that's what I do, right? I back up with evidence. I study issues, and trust me, if I can't study a bill before I am told to vote on it, I will abstain. Because I can't in good conscience call that governance. And that's exactly what went on with the Every Student Succeeds Act. It was released November 30th. 2 days later, an entire Congress voted on it. Over 1,000 pages. Okay? So that's why I'm going to run, because I've had experience at the state level, at the federal level. I saw what was going on, and I think we've got to put sanity and good old Midwestern common sense in Washington. I wear my Route 66 badge because, to me, what happened in the history of Route 66, when the federal government came in and developed I-44, crushing entrepreneurship on Route 66, what they did for about 10 minutes more of speed time was ruin communities. And do you see the parallels here of standardization and imposition of an agenda coming into a community, changing its profile, and not for the better, all right? So if we're going to talk about representation, it truly must be people going there, not Washington imposing itself on us. And that's what the Ozarks told me. Yeah. All right. All right, thank you.